Hello, YouTube. Welcome back to another episode of the Deep Dive Analysis series. Today, we are doing G2 Esports, or I should say G2 Stride is their name now. Of course, we got Atomic, Daniel, and Beast Mode, all very solid players, all of which we analyzed in a previous episode, except for Daniel, because if I remember correctly, Daniel did not make the Winter Major. If I remember correctly. Yeah, last season he did not make the winter major, if I remember correctly. So that's something that we can really look for. I believe Dignitas made it instead of Space Station last season, and then of course Daniel made played on V1, where they also didn't make the major or the world championship. So Daniel's going to be a fun player for us to analyze. But without further ado, let's see. So we're going to be looking at the Open Qualifier 2. If you guys didn't watch my previous episode, we looked at Carmine Core. And the link, of course, will be provided in the subscription to all our notes in previous sections. Here's Carmine Core's notes if anybody wants to look at it. But enough wasting time. Let's get into analyzing G2. So the format that we're going to be looking at, we're going to look at a group stage match. Then after looking at a group stage match, we'll move on to looking at a quarterfinal match, then a semifinal match, and then a grand finals match. That's the format that we like to do because normally after that first group stage match, we get a list of all their individual and team strengths and weaknesses, and then we kind of see how those weaknesses get worse and worse as a tournament goes on or as nerves go on, or if they stay the same, if a team like G2 is able to play with confidence the entire time. But here we go. Let's make sure that we got access to the replays real quick. Yep, replay files. Here we go. So, what match should we look at first? I assume the match everyone wants us to look at will probably be Space Station. Will be the Space Station Swiss stage match, round 3. So, Space Station, they had just come off a win against Luminosity in Game 5, and off of Akron in Game 5. Wow, University of Akron. Not only did they make main event, they almost took SSG in that first series. Hey, NJC, thank you so much for the Prime sub. Much appreciated. But let's continue. Here we go. We got G2 versus Space Station Gaming. Probably going to look at game 3. So it's a game, game 2. It's a game 2 overtime. G2 actually lost. So let's find that match. Ball chasing, Swiss stage. Round 3 will be the upper bracket. Oh, they don't need to separate out anymore. Okay. G2 versus SSG. But all right. But first of all, we got to have an idea of what we're going to be looking for in this series. So, of course, if you watch the previous video, you've already seen this. You can skip forward until we start the replay. But for the stream and everyone else, this is what we're going to mainly be looking for. So there are two parts of Rack League that we're going to be looking for. We're going to be looking for the individual basics, then what we're expecting out of individuals at the pro level. What I like to call them is the necessary individual basics. And then there's the necessary team basics, or are players able to fill in the 3 necessary jobs in the field as quickly and efficiently as possible. So the first individual basic that we're going to be looking for in teams is possession. This is the most important idea individually. At the end of the day, what do you need in order to score? You need the ball in order to score. So it doesn't make sense to give away the ball just to try and get it back. Cut out the middleman, get better mechanics, develop your ability to maintain possession, and of course, that's the one main concept. No matter if you have boost or not, you want to try to maintain team possession. That way, you can have a better chance at applying pressure or relieving pressure depending on where you are on the pitch. The other individual concept that we're going to be looking for is the ability for pros to read the ball, where the ball is going, rather than react. There are a couple of pros that do react to the play, and it kind of makes them slower to the ball. When I say read the play, I mean you look at where the ball is, you look at your opponents, you look at their angle, elevation, their speed, and you can tell exactly where that ball is going to go before the ball is ever hit. Now, depending on how good you are at reading the play, that could determine whether you read the play half a second ahead of time or 3 to 4 seconds ahead of time. TRK, an example of being really good at reading the ball ahead of time. Sometimes he puts himself in a position magically out of nowhere. 3 to 4 seconds later, he has the ball. Of course, that's only a little bit of an exaggeration, but he's really great at looking at the play in front of him and knowing where that ball is going to be 100%. And that's what makes him so fast, because technically, even a bronze that knows that a double jump aerial can technically be as fast as a pro. So where's that speed come from? It comes from your ability to read the play and pre-position. So that's one thing we're going to be looking at. And then those are the two necessary individual things we'll be looking at going into this, but also we're going to be looking at necessary team basics. There are three necessary areas of the field that always need to be covered in priority. So the three necessary areas of the field will be on the ball, support, and off-ball pressure. Of course, most people understand why people on the ball and why people supporting are necessary to highest level of Rocket League, but the reason why off-ball pressure is necessary is, think of it this way. When you don't apply off-ball pressure, that means you instantly rotate back. So when your teammate, you have someone on the ball and you have someone supporting, and you instantly rotate back, technically we're giving up a ton of space to the opponents for free, where they can position themselves exactly where they need to be. Whereas if we instantly rotate back, since there's already someone on the ball and someone supporting, we don't really have anything that we can really do. So it's more so, if our goal is to score as many goals as possible, we want to apply as much pressure as possible. And if we have a third man that instantly rotates out and doesn't apply off-ball pressure, we're not maximizing our ability to maintain pressure. Or on defense, we're not maximizing our ability to take back space and try to relieve pressure. That's why off-ball pressure ends up being a necessary thing. And we can actually show this really relatively easily. We can pull up a 2D map. What essentially happens, if we have no off-ball pressure, that means our third man will instantly rotate out. Another way of looking at this is our team is only covering this much of the pitch. Another way of looking at that is we're giving over 2/3 of the field to the other team to use for free this way. Now let me ask you another question. Would you guys want to give a team like G2 Esports 2/3 of the field to do whatever the heck they want? Would you want to give a team like Vitality, Carmine Core 2/3 of the field to do whatever the heck they want? Probably not, right? That's why off-ball pressure becomes a necessity at the highest level game, and we're still going to be looking for it even in the best teams, because that's how we notice how clean a rotation is. If G2's rotations are clean, we always have someone on the ball, someone supporting close, and somebody applying off-ball pressure. The closer we see G2 to that ideal rotation, tells us how good their structure is and how good their rotations are. And then, of course, there are necessary basic individual side of things. They got to be taking possession and reading the play. That's going to be the basis that we're going to use going into these replays. But without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back, anybody who skipped forward. But we're going to now look into the replay. So as I said, we're going to be looking at game number 2. We'll take a sneak peek at the stats. Stats don't mean everything, but they at least can give us an idea of what to look for when it comes down to what's a potential weakness or what's a potential strength. So the first thing we look at is we want to see this demo number being positive. So beast mode, he's positive on demos versus demos taken. Beast mode, perfect. We're looking at Daniel. He's neutral, so he's getting demoed once, but he's also getting one demo a game. So maybe he's doing something that's not allowing him to get as many demos, or it could just be a mechanics thing. He's bad at getting demos. And Atomic, he's actually negative when it comes to demos. So that's where we have to see, why is Atomic so low on demos himself, and why is he getting demoed a lot of the time? Because Garrett G, ironically, said it best when the Peeps were starting to win DreamHack Montreal. How do you deal with the demo playstyle? You just got to avoid them. And it sounds funny, but in reality, that's what you got to do. You got to have your ears open. You got to listen for people. You got to be aware of where they are, so you can try to stay in position as best you can while avoiding the people that are going for you. So it's something that we're going to be looking at. Boost-wise, stolen pads. Looks like there's a lot of stolen pads. Atomic actually has the lowest amount. Makes sense though. Beast Mode and Daniel, they're going to be very aggressive a majority of the time. And then looking at that ground speed, we normally want to see this between 50 and 60. Normally, if you're below 50, it means you're pre-jumping everything. And this is kind of an outlier stat, Beast Mode being below 50. So it could mean that he's pre-jumping everything and he's messing up. Or it could mean he has such a good read on the game that he can pre-jump and everything is still fine. So a lot of cool stats here for G2. Without further ado, let's look at game number 2. Here we go. Who should we look at first? You know what? Let's look at Daniel. Let's see how well Daniel does. So right off the bat, we see Daniel get the solid kickoff. And right here, he is now second man for Beast Mode. So of course, Daniel's on low boost, but nowhere did I say the big thing, because of course boost is an issue for some players, but the best players in the world are still able to do their job no matter how much boost they have. They're just good at grabbing pads and supporting their teammates. So he's going to be supporting Beast Mode here. We can see Daniel didn't have the best read on the ball. It doesn't hurt them too much here. Yeah, we can see Daniel's kind of meandering, but look, one thing that's good for Daniel in this situation is even though he's on low boost, he's trying as second man to support close. But one issue I'm noticing right off the bat is we do not have a semblance of a structure here for G2, which is weird. If you asked me last season who was the best team in terms of rotations, internationally, it would have been G2 Esports. They would know, they understand more than anybody last season, make sure ball guy, support guy, off ball pressure are all always filled in. We can see right off the bat, Daniel, he's not able to follow that ball. It's not the end of the world. It is something that we're gonna have to keep a lookout for. But he goes behind Beast Mode, but then we see Atomic ends up in front of his teammates. So what ended up happening here? So he's supporting, he forces, he ends up getting beat, so now he's technically third man. So now Atomic in his mind should be thinking, okay, well, first of all, is Beast Mode able to follow his own ball? If Beast Mode's able to follow his own ball, there's no real reason for Atomic to cut here. Of course, Atomic is trying to... Oh, wow. Of course, Atomic is trying to avoid demos here. So he ends up cutting in front of Daniel and letting Beast Mode still go. So it's not the end of the world in this situation, but we do see kind of an unnecessary cut. If I remember correctly, this is actually an issue that we saw with Atomic with G2 last season. He didn't really have many weaknesses, but one thing that Atomic did was he sometimes cut unnecessarily, and it kind of led to their team flow kind of stagnating. As we can see here, he cuts, and then G2's entire flow slows down. And when the flow slows down, our momentum slows down. And if we have, if we look at this board again real quick, why do we want a team flow? Why do we want momentum? Because the more momentum an individual player has in Rocket League in the forward direction, the greater the sphere of influence of that player and what they're able to do. If you slow them down, their ability to reach further also gets lessened. And that's why unnecessary cuts or rotating back normally in this forward direction kind of interrupts the flow of the team. So this does look like it's more of an Atomic thing right now. So we are just going to put it under a weakness for Atomic. Cutting unnecessarily, leading to slowdowns in momentum / flow of rotation. And of course, as we talked about already, what does this lead to? This leads to smaller individual spheres of influence, and which of course, what does that mean? It means that players aren't able to do as much when it comes to doing their job. But it could just be an Atomic situation here, because technically speaking, even though we have these issues, Beast Mode ends up, we still have a first man in Beast Mode, Atomic still supports, and Daniel is technically still third man. Now he's going to support Beast Mode. He's going to end up following it up. So it's looking a little crazy right now. It's looking a little spastic. But one thing I want you to notice is that even as weird as it looks, G2 still at all times have, at minimum, a first man and a second man. As we can see, Beast Mode, like, even after all that weird stuff, Beast Mode is on the ball as first man, and Atomic is supporting close as a second man. And if we even go earlier in this play, technically, even in this weird situation, Atomic's first man, and Daniel's a second man. And then we can see here, Beast Mode's a first man, Daniel's a second man. And even in this weird situation right here, Daniel's a first man, and Atomic is a second man. So we can see that G2 has a great understanding on a great team understanding of ensures there is always someone on the ball and someone supporting the person on the ball. So this is a strength for G2. They really understand this. It's very similar to Carmine Core. Carmine Core, both teams of Carmine Core that we looked at last week and G2 this week, they understand the necessity of ensuring there's always someone on the ball and someone supporting. But one thing that we're seeing kind of an issue right now is off-ball pressure, but I'm going to hesitate putting that towards a team weakness because it could be more individual issues with the players that aren't leading to it. But if all three players keep rushing back as third man, then that would tell us something that G2 as a whole is not illustrating the importance of that off-ball pressure role. Because right here, we saw Atomic go, and Daniel's supporting again. And this is the second time we've seen Daniel support and yet not read the play. We can see that it looks like a weird situation, but Daniel hits the ball forward. Chicago gets it up the wall, but if we're reading the play here, we can tell easily that Atomic is either hitting that ball or beating Chicago to the ball. Like, Chicago this entire time is not touching that ball based on what's happening, because we can see the way Atomic's flying for it, that at minimum it's going to be a 50-50 that goes forward. So the fact that Daniel turned away, that one's a little bit of a harder read, but it shows another situation where, look at the opponents. Whereas even though Daniel didn't read the play, and honestly, it didn't look like LJ read the play either. But since LJ at least ensured that he was facing the play, whereas Daniel didn't face the play. He didn't read what was happening. He didn't read what the opponents are doing. Since he wasn't facing the play at a bare minimum, that means that the second man on Space Station was able to beat him to the ball. So this is an issue that we'll have to put down for Daniel as a weakness. Daniel has issues with supporting close and facing the play as a support play. This leads to the opponent support player beating him to the ball in situations where Daniel was supporting. So this leads to a big giveaway in possession and pressure for G2 in most instances. And this is actually very similar to to Tao from Carmine Core. Carmine Core also had issues with reading the play, and it put him out of position. And Tao as well was the main reason why Carmine Core ended up losing pressure a lot of the time. So we're going to keep our eyes on Daniel here for a little bit. Let's see what he does strength-wise. So here, he does rotate forward, and now he's watching mid. So this was good from Daniel. So he is pushing forward in situations where maybe it's not as cluttered or not as weird. So maybe when G2 are being pressured for a long time, they stop holding their nerve, and they're kind of just making sure the ball doesn't go in their net, so to speak. And it actually makes it harder for G2 to relieve pressure since they don't have all three jobs filled in at all times. So it's something that we do got to keep a lookout for. Now, why do we get scored on? Let's get Beast Mode. Beast Mode doesn't read that Daniel's going, but that one's fine. But in this situation, we can see Atomic Forces. Beast Mode wasn't there for either. So this one, we got to look at Atomic. So let's see what happens here for Atomic. So he's watching the mid. Now he's going to go support Daniel. Fine for now. But you can see he ends up reacting to this play. And it ends up making him slower to the ball. So we can see that the ball's bouncing right here. And we can see that Chicago is jumping. So if we're looking at this play here, we want to be facing Chicago and where that ball is going to be right here. So Atomic should be facing the play right here, bounces out, he instantly goes, and he beats second man Hoxer to the ball. So we are going to have to we're going to keep looking at Atomic after this goal, because he ends up misreading this play as well. So it does look like it might be a consistent issue for Atomic, where he has issues reading the play, but something that it could have just been a one-time thing for Atomic. So we do want to make sure that it's an actual consistent issue before we write it down. Here he supports well off the kickoff. That's all well and great. He goes for a boost steal, so we do got some off-ball pressure there. Now we got Daniel. And we see Atomic supports well here. Passes it up to beast mode. Perfect. Then he supports. Reads the play really well. So here it's pretty fine. And then Daniel ends up getting beat. So, again, just like we talked about for Daniel, he's second man for Atomic. But no matter how weird the situation is, he wants to be able to read where this ball's going and support close. So he's supporting close here. It looks like he just didn't get a good read on the opponent beating him to the ball. So he read where the ball was bouncing, but as you can see, he still turns after the ball's going. So I think we do have to put this as a weakness for Daniel. Daniel has issues reading the play ahead of time on 50-50s. 50-50s, which leads him to be slower to the ball than opponents that do read the play. There we go. So there's something now. I'm just going to mark it down for 50-50s for right now, because in other situations, it looks like he has a pretty good read on this type of stuff. Because right here, he should be seeing that he's clearly getting beat to the ball. He doesn't see that. And now we can see off-ball pressure. He's going for a boost steal. It's not the most necessary off-ball pressure. The ball's on his side of the field, so better off-ball pressure would probably be something along the lines of rotating down the middle, grabbing pads, looking for demos in the midfield, trying to intercept passes. That's probably the better off-ball pressure since our team's on defense. But I like that he's at least going for it. It seems like there is a importance in the G2 mindset for there to be somebody applying off-ball pressure. They're not afraid to go for it, but it does seem to be that there's not a necessity for it. So it's not really a weakness for G2, but off-ball pressure is also not a strength for G2. Here we go. Daniel again. Have an issue with the force. Beast Mode's going to force here. Good read from Beast Mode. One player we haven't looked at much so far is Beast Mode. Let's look at Beast Mode for a little bit. Beast Mode ends up pushing forward. So yeah, I think that's one thing we're noticing in the G2 playstyle. The type of off-ball pressure they're prioritizing seems to be boost more than anything else. So we can see right here, Beast Mode ends up rotating up the field to get a boost steal. But this does put him in a position where he can end up being kind of like an outlet pass, so to speak. So I will actually say this adds to the dynamicity of the playstyle. Their playstyle is very dynamic. We can see they mix up things between offense and defense. They mix up demos, they mix up solo plays, they mix up passing plays. They also mix up where they do the passes from. So I think that's a strength that we got to put down for G2. G2, they have a very dynamic playstyle where they mix up whether they pass, solo play, demo play, etc. So that's honestly a very good strength for G2. They have a very dynamic playstyle, which of course, the more dynamic your playstyle, the harder you guys are to read. So I will say, as a strength for G2, G2 understands why off-ball pressure is good. But, however, G2 do not understand why off-ball pressure is necessary. So we can put why they understand why off-ball pressure is good, and they try to ensure there is off-ball pressure when called. But we do have to put G2 do not understand the full necessity of off-ball pressure, especially on defense when under pressure, which can lead to teams maintaining pressure for longer periods of time. So you're probably wondering, even though G2 have this issue, why do they end up winning? Well, G2 individually are three of the best players in the world. If you look at Beast Mode, you look at Daniel, you look at Atomic, all three of them individually have such a high have such a high individual ceiling. Like, that's something we got to put in all their strengths. Individually, one of the best mechanical players in the world. Did you miss anything? No, we're still on the first replay for G2. Welcome, Matthias Maximus. How you doing, good sir? Long time no see. So far, we got a lot of notes, so if need be, Matthias, you can pause for a second. You can look at the notes. But overall, so far we're doing good. Sorry, we were noticing a lot for G2. We're seeing some issues with Daniel on support and reading the play. But one thing G2 are ensuring is they're making sure that that nobody on the other team has free time and free space. Or when it comes down to Beast Mode and Atomic, they really are trying to make sure that the other team does not have time and space to do whatever they want. They're always up instantly, and they're very fast to the ball. So that's something we do got to put as a strength for both Beast Mode and Atomic. Individually, ensure that there is always someone challenging the ball and are very fast players. Speed is a great weapon to catch teams off guard while applying maximum pressure even if they are aware. That's something we can put for both Beast Mode and Atomic as a strength. So good stuff from Beast Mode and Atomic. All right, then let's continue. I want to go back to Daniel for a little bit because I want to be able to see because of course Daniel is a good player, but I want to be able to see if there's more to him than just being a very mechanical player. Here we go. Daniel pops the ball off the backboard. One thing I will say G2 does really well is they understand the importance of possession. Even on low boost, we're seeing that G2 are always putting the ball in a spot where they or a teammate can follow it and try to maintain possession. That's another team strength that we can put down for G2. G2 understands the importance of maintaining possession no matter what. They always try to put the ball in a spot where either they or a teammate can follow it. The longer teams have possession, the more control over the game they have. All right. So G2 looking really good. We're noticing a lot of team strengths for G2. There are a decent amount of weaknesses still that teams can exploit, but they're a really strong team and individually a very strong team. So we do got to see, though, Beast Mode. We don't really have a weakness for Beast Mode now. It very well could be that Beast Mode's just a very solid player. But let's look at Beast Mode right here. So again, Beast Mode ends up pumping, applying off-ball pressure. Really good from Beast Mode. But now he's kind of sitting on boost. Daniel cuts and fills in for him. Ends up working out really well for G2. So we can see here, Beast Mode ends up, he should be filling in support for Atomic. But let's look at Daniel. So Daniel, he's going for a bump, going for that off-ball pressure. Now he's rotating up the field with his team. And then here, he was going to go behind Beast Mode. But since he sees Beast Mode is not going, he fills in second for his teammates here. Atomic becomes off-ball pressure and is looking for demos. And Daniel individually gets the goal. So this is something that we do got to put down for now as a strength for Daniel. When teammates are not going, he will cut for speed to ensure there is always someone on the ball or supporting. So this is good from Daniel. So Daniel might have an issue with where he's supporting. He might be a little far away when he is supporting, but he fills in that position as quickly and efficiently as possible. So that's a really strong part of Daniel's game that we can continue to look at. Alright. Beast Mode ends up winning the kickoff very strongly. But that's one thing we're noticing from Beast Mode. When he is that off-ball pressure man, he is not really paying attention as much on the demo side. That's something that we do have to be a bit aware for Beast Mode as a third man. He's paying so much attention to the ball that the other team doesn't really have to worry about him. Like, he's not, like, Beast Mode, of course, he's a threat if he goes for it, but that's something that the other team's aware enough. They can read where he's going, they can read where he is, and they don't have to really be worried about if he's upfield. But we are noticing that Beast Mode does cut unnecessarily sometimes. He cuts unnecessarily, kind of hurts the flow, the rotation. He's not really trying to apply off-ball pressure in a lot of ways. So it's iffy. I'm not going to say it's a weakness because he's still a threat in and of itself, but it is hurting G2's ability to maintain pressure for longer periods of time when we don't see him going for demos when his teammates aren't going to pass it. So something that G2 did really well last season is that they kind of use their teammate as an outlet pass, but then after the outlet pass, where they kind of pass it to him, they'll pass it back. Then this person would go for demos no matter what. Here we're kind of seeing Beast Mode go upfield, go for a boost steal, which is off-ball pressure. He'll receive a pass, but then whether he passes it back or shoots, he kind of rushes out afterwards. And this is what's leading to other teams having more time and space from a team perspective than G2 Esports last season. And this is something that we're noticing mainly just with Beast Mode. I am going to switch to Atomic for a little bit, just to see if he has that issue as well, because we've already seen him when he's in front of the ball look for demos and try to find ways to apply off-ball pressure to clear things up for his team. Here, Atomic, he's first man. He's going to force high. Solid stuff. Hoxer almost gets a really good read. Here, we can see Atomic. He supports decently well. He's trying to support his teammate. No matter how much low boost he has, he's going. Solid stuff from Atomic so far. Yeah, it seems like G2 do have a boost problem as a whole. Like, we see that G2 are prioritizing boost over their job sometimes. Because if we're looking at right here, Atomic wasn't able to do much for his team. But let's say Beast Mode and Daniel did execute here. Let's say Daniel read the play there. Daniel gets possession. Atomic's not really doing anything for his team here to try and help his team out. Right? When you think of Rocket League, it's a team game. So on offense, we want someone demoing while someone's on the ball, while someone's supporting, right? Defense is the exact same way. We want somebody on the ball, in this case Beast Mode, someone supporting, in this case Daniel, and we want Atomic applying off-ball pressure at the exact same time. All three players trying to do jobs as best they can gives G2 the best chance of getting possession and relieving pressure if all three people are doing that job. So think of it this way. If Beast Mode's doing his job and Daniel's doing his job and we don't have off-ball pressure, technically we're making it harder for G2 to relieve pressure and to get possession back. Or just as if in this situation, Beast Mode doesn't do his job as first man really well. LJ kind of gets a clean beat, but Daniel also doesn't support. So let's assume Beast Mode did force high well here, and let's say Atomic is applying off-ball pressure. Since Daniel's not supporting here properly, just like if we didn't have off-ball pressure, a bad support player is also going to affect our chances of relieving pressure or getting possession back. And in this case, it actually leads to a goal. Beast Mode forces. Atomic's not applying off-ball pressure here to help out his teammates in this situation, and Daniel doesn't support really well, which gives LJ a free chance at the G2 net, and that's why they end up scoring. But we can even go further back. Right here, Atomic supports, he goes behind Beast Mode, but then Atomic, as a first man here, he ends up giving away possession. So now we can see, like, where, as first man, what could we have done better here? I'm not going to say this is a weakness. He was trying to get a beat on Chicago to a teammate. But, of course, it was more so on individual execution, which at the pro level, sometimes you're not going to execute as well as you could have. But it's all about trying to do the bare minimum for your job at all times. So here, honestly, I think Atomic's looking fine. He's going for the boost. Maybe Atomic in his mind thinks it's already in his net anyway. That's why he's grabbing the boost. But we do want to look at the other players here. So right here, Beast Mode jumps. He forces high. I mean, Beast Mode did what he could here. So Beast Mode in this situation. Oh, it looks like he ends up side flipping, kind of bumping his teammate anyway. Then here. This is kind of, I mean, this is where I would say it's probably an unnecessary cut. Because in this situation, Daniel's already here. So in my mind, the closest person to the ball should be the one forcing. So Daniel should probably force here. And since Beast Mode's further away from the play, he has a better angle to where he can cover the backboard, he can cover the net, and he can cover the midfield. Whereas Daniel, he kind of has low momentum. So he can still force here just fine, but it's going to be a lot harder for him to support from this angle. So this is what I would say is another unnecessary cut for Beast Mode that we do got to put as a weakness. I think you're looking fine. Thanks, Osiris. But welcome to the stream, Osiris. How you doing, man? But here we go. So let's look at, so now what do we got to look at? Looking at beast mode. What weakness do we got to put down for beast mode? It looks like beast mode does have an issue with cutting unnecessarily in situations where a teammate can easily do a better job. Hello, Chica. How you doing, homie? Welcome to the stream. Cutting unnecessarily in situations where a teammate can easily do better. So, better, which leads to slowdowns in the flow / momentum of rotation and makes the individual job of teammates far harder. And we can see this issue right here. Beast mode cuts unnecessarily. So Daniel, who would easily have had an easier force, now has to try and support this really weird angle. So let's look at this from Daniel's perspective. Think of this. So Daniel, he's on low boost, but here Daniel's applying off-ball pressure. He sees his teammates getting dunked. But then right here, so Daniel's mind, he's like, okay, well, I'm right under the ball. So all I got to do is at minimum force high, but maybe get the ball myself. And I got a teammate behind me who's going to support and read my force. So this is what Daniel's thinking right here. So depending on how early Beast Mode calls for this, Beast Mode's probably called for Daniel's ready to go, and then right here he hesitates, which means this is where he heard that Beast Mode called that he was going to cut. So now Daniel, even though he doesn't know where Beast Mode is, has to now try to read Beast Mode's force and LJ's hit, but as we can see, he wasn't able to do so, and they end up getting scored on. So that is a weakness from Beast Mode. It's the same weakness we saw from Atomic earlier, where they're trying to cut for speed, but here it ends up hurting them. So it's also like you want to cut for speed, but if your teammate's already in a position, let them do that job. Try to use your teammate so as a pawn almost. Or if your teammate's already in position, let them do the hard job. And since you have the boost and you have the better angle of approach, let them do the force and you end up be the support player. So we do got to see if that keeps up. But we do have to put down for beast mode as well, where beast mode, when he is off the ball, tends to wait and watch the ball for far too long, making him useless to the overall goal of pressure on offense and defense on occasion. All right. How much would a live replay analysis be? I mean, if I'm streaming in general and you either have paid for a session or you have enough channel points, I do replay review on stream sometimes. But of course, I've mainly been streaming these things, but if I'm ever streaming ranked or something more casual, that would be a time to come in and ask for a replay review live on stream. But here we go. Beast mode, when he's off the ball, tends to wait and watch the ball for far too long, making him useless to the overall goal of pressure on offense and defense. Which, of course, we know off-ball pressure at this point is necessary. So what do we want to see him do? We want to see him, if he, like, of course, wait for a second. See if your teammate can pass it upfield to you, because that's a great way to get an outlet pass. But if your teammate's not going to pass it, or if they do pass it, afterwards you got to immediately go into that mindset of, okay, I'm third man, I'm off ball pressure, I got to go, go, go. But, all right. Let's look at Atomic for a little bit here. So Atomic does end up going for boost. So I am going to put here as a weakness for G2, now that we've seen it happen enough times, the players do not understand the necessity of playing their job over boost. this leads to situations where the players are out of position, not doing their job in time, which gives the opponents an easier time to relieve pressure on defense and continue to apply pressure on offense. So this is a big issue for G2, which is something we didn't see in Carmine Core. So what are Carmine Core doing better than G2? Well, you can argue that Vatira and Rise individually are better at reading the play than the G2 players. That's one individual way you can say they're better. But the one thing that Carmine Core ensure they do is they're always at minimum in first or second man. We're seeing sometimes G2 are going for a big boost, which makes them get into position a lot later, which ends up making G2 lose pressure, because if you're not in position in time, that means individually you have to execute a lot more to do the same job as if you were already in position. So that's another issue we're noticing with G2 that ends up hurting their ability to maintain pressure. No hydration for this play. I forgot to get a water with me before the stream. If I wasn't recording a YouTube video, I would go do that right now, but we got to make sacrifices. But one thing we do got to put as a strength for G2, and I'm going to let the play go through a little bit so I can talk about it a little bit more, is that G2, they are very good at the adaptive side of rotations. Of course, sometimes we see the players cut unnecessarily, but sometimes they make, but since they do cut unnecessarily sometimes, I'd say that's more of a fine-tuning thing. But G2 as a whole, they're great at understanding that if somebody's going for demos and no one's on the ball, somebody's got to cut to go on the ball. Or if somebody's on the ball and somebody's going for demos, somebody has to fill in second, no matter where that play is. So G2 have a great understanding of the adaptive side of higher level rotations, where you have to be able to look at where your teammates are and see what job needs to be filled in and instantly filling in that job. So G2 do have a higher understanding of the adaptive side of rotations. So that's something that we can put down as a strength for G2. G2 understand the importance of having having at minimum on the ball and support always filled in, and understand the adaptive rotations necessary to fill in these roles, even if the structure or current play is awkward or weird. So this is stuff that's really good for when teams are playing nervous. So G2, I expect, even if they're nervous at LAN this season, if they are able to hold their nerve at least a little bit, they do have a lot of skills that will benefit them for when it comes to LANs. But Daniel, actually, his weakness when it comes to support and reading 50s, this is an issue that will hurt him when it comes to LAN, something you do have to keep in mind. But for example, beast mode cutting, as long as he executes, cuts don't technically matter too much. It's the type of thing where in Rocket League, like, if your teammates may double commit, like you and your teammate might double commit, but as long as one of you execute, it's perfectly fine still. It's not optimal, but it's still fine. That's something that we talked about with Carmine Core last season. EU are really good at not caring about execution. They just try to play for their team. They just try to do whatever they can that's best for their team, whether or not they believe they're going to execute. So even if they don't hit the ball, since they still went at the ball at full force, they're still applying pressure. They're still technically doing their job due to a concept called pressure by presence. And overall, that's what makes EU so scary, even if they're losing on LAN, because they're always trying to do the right thing, whether they're executing or not. Whereas NA teams, especially Daniel in the past, they worry so much about their individual execution that they end up hesitating and do their job a little too slow. So not only are they just not going when they hesitate, but they're not applying any pressure of any sort. Even if Daniel forced himself to go, even if he didn't believe he was going to hit the ball, it'd still be applying pressure to the other team and allowing his teammates to still follow up and do their normal roles, even if Daniel's not going to hit the ball. That is something we notice in a lot of North American teams, though. It's not just Daniel and G2, but it is a weakness that makes North America individually. They have to be emotionally stable if they want to be able to perform towards their best on land, which we do see sometimes. We've seen V1 versus EU teams in the past where they're able to hold their nerve and they're able to do just fine. But we've also seen them play against Team Secret in the Fall Major last season, not hold their nerve, and since they're worrying so much about execution, they end up failing once again. So it's the North American teams. They do have a mentality difference that they do have to work on for the most part, but at the end of the day, that's what makes EU so scary. Even if on paper they might be a worse team. So Daniel ends up misreading the play here. What ends up happening? We do got to look at this. So Daniel, yep, he just ends up misreading it. That is technically a mechanical mistake. I doubt we'll see Daniel make this mistake again, though. It's not a weakness. It's just a one-time mistake here. Wonder if watching this will make me SSL. I mean, looking at anything, like drawing resources from everybody. Pros, other people in your friend group, coaching, etc. There's a lot of different ideas that can help you get SSL, help you get better. But the big things you want to take away from this are the concepts. The pros themselves aren't perfect at what we understand are logically good concepts. What you want to really look at is like when Daniel is taking possession, how is he taking possession? Or if you see that the player is supporting correctly, ask yourself, why is he supporting here? What's he reading? Why is he going where? More so look at, like, have an idea in your head of what's a good thing to go for, possessions, reading the play, and the three necessary areas of the pitch, and just seeing when pros do those jobs correctly, ask yourself how they did them correctly, why they did what they did, etc. That's stuff that will help you, because pros, they make mistakes all the time. All right. But here we go. Let's continue aside from that tangent. So, what do we got to put? Daniel, individually one of the best mechanical players in the world. When teammates are not going, he will cut for speed to ensure there's always somebody on the ball or supporting. All right, that's all well and good. But honestly, Daniel doesn't really seem to have much strengths outside of that. I mean, it kind of seems weird since everyone knows individually Daniel is such a good player. So we'll look at Daniel a little bit more going into the next replay. Normally, we're able to fill all the stuff out with one replay. We do got to look. But one thing we are noticing with Daniel is his issues. The issue with supporting close and facing the play as a support player. This leads to the opponent support player beating him to the ball in situations where Daniel is supporting. This leads to a big giveaway in possession and pressure for G2 in most instances. Daniel also has issues reading the play ahead of time on 50-50s, which leads to him being slower to the ball than opponents that do read the play, which of course will also give away possession and give away pressure. Beast Mode individually, one of the best mechanical players in the world. We all know that. Individually ensures that there is always somebody challenging the ball. Individually ensures that there is always somebody challenging the ball and is a very fast player. Very fast player. And this is on purpose. He is a very fast player, and speed is a great weapon to catch teams off guard while applying maximum pressure, even if they are aware of what Beast Mode's doing. But we are noticing a weakness individually for Beast Mode. He cuts unnecessarily in situations where a teammate can easily do better, which leads to slowdowns in flow/momentum of rotation and makes the individual job of teammates far harder. Beast Mode, when he is off the ball, also tends to wait, so it kind of makes Beast Mode useless for decent periods of time when a teammate isn't able to get the ball to him. So that's something that we do got to take note of for Beast Mode. Atomic, not many individual weaknesses. He does have an issue where he does cut sometimes, but again, this is the type of weakness where even on land, if he does cut, as long as he executes, it's perfectly fine. So one thing we want to look at individually, one of the best mechanical players in the world. Speed is a great weapon to catch teams off guard while applying maximum pressure, even if they're one of the best mechanical players in the world and fastest players in the world. That's something that we have to put down. Speed is a great weapon to catch teams off guard, even if they are aware. So I'm going to add on this to Beast Mode as well. Honestly, I think we can put that on for Daniel as well. He's a very fast player, but it's the positioning that ends up hurting him. What did I do here? Oh, never mind. We're good. Individually ensures that there's always somebody on the ball. Right? And Daniel, we can add this on for Daniel as well. He is a fast player. That's why he is so good. But of course, his positioning tends to cause issues with losing pressure. But all right, so far good stuff from G2. Got a good list of things going and a lot of team strength. So a lot of G2's things come from their teammates. They ensure there's always somebody on the ball and supporting. They have a very dynamic play style. They mix things up. They understand why off-ball pressure is good, and they try to ensure there is off-ball pressure when they're calm. So we do have to understand that G2 do not understand the full necessity under pressure, especially on defense, which can lead to maintaining pressure, issues of maintaining pressure. So they're good at some parts of things, but they're not good at all of them. But the good thing about G2 is they always have at least a little bit of an understanding of what makes a good team work. But all right, let's move on to the semifinals. So this is gonna be the weird one. I think it's honestly probably we can probably compare this to a group stage match. So we probably should skip right to G2 versus Gen G, which I think everybody wants to look at anyway. Right? So let's skip over to them. So let's go to a semifinals match. In the future, we might actually look at Pirates on a Boat. They're being coached by Achieves. They're actually a fairly solid team by what I've seen. But let's continue. So single elimination stage, day 5, G2 versus Gen G Mobile 1. Let's look at the player stats real quick. Want to see positive demos? Daniel, positive demos, perfect. Beast mode, negative on demos, and Atomic is positive on demos. All right, so beast mode, negative on demos, something we can take a look out for. Ground stat, looking between 50 and 60. Perfect. All right, then let's get into one game. What game should we look at first? Let's look at, well, we're only gonna be looking at one match in the series, and we'll move on to the grand final. But probably would be good to look at. I want to look at a game win here for G2. Let's look at game 1. All right, and let's start off. We don't have a lot of strengths for Daniel, so we're gonna stay on Daniel here. But technically, there's a very good chance that we won't have to add anything to the notes anyway. So let's look at this for G2. And of course, everybody, make sure to check out the spreadsheet after the stream. I'll do a lot of cleaning up of the notes as well, cleaning up points I should have made. So of course, the stream, this is more so kind of like the raw analysis that we get from this. The YouTube video probably either be posted later tonight or tomorrow, probably tomorrow morning if I had to make a good guess. But thank you to all the support that we got on that YouTube video. The last time I checked, middle of the day yesterday, I think we had around 200 or something views on that deep dive analysis, which is the most amount of views we got on a deep dive analysis. So thank you so much to everybody for the support, and thank you to everybody in the stream for showing up as well. You can see right off the bat, though, Daniel is a very confident player. Let's see. All right, we do have to put as a strength for Daniel. I mean, we do got to put what we can. When Daniel is confident, and he is confident and reads where the ball is going, he goes at the ball with full force and no hesitation. But of course, that's of course when he is confident, right? So I don't know if we can even really put that as a full strength, but something we do want to keep a lookout for here for Daniel. So, why does G2 score here? Something I want you guys to notice here for G2. Let's look at it from more of an aerial POV. So look at this from G2. So in this instance, we have somebody on the ball in beast mode. Atomic, he ends up rotating out far for a big boost. So this could have been an issue for G2, but he ends up getting back into position in time. Individually, he's good enough to know when he should grab boost in some situations. And we have off-ball pressure from Daniel. So here we see G2 ensuring that somebody's on the ball, someone's supporting, and someone's applying off-ball pressure. And this one ends up leading to the goal. We can see right here, Beast Mode gets the beat. He's individually beats 2 players. And then even if Beast Mode could score himself, Atomic was there with the support, but we can again see that issue with G2's structure, where they end up rotating out for boost instead of grabbing pads and staying closer to the field. So this does cause issues where G2 can actually lose pressure. So that's something that we're going to have to put down for a G2 weakness. G2, actually, technically we've written this down already. The players do not understand the necessity of their job over boost. This leads to situations where players are out of position, not doing their job in time. There we go. So we technically already put this for G2. So this is another example of this happening for G2. Now, why didn't it matter for G2 in this instance? Because individually, well, we got to look at it. I'm sure you all want to watch Beast Mode's play here. Beast Mode, he gets the dunk on apparently Jack, and he puts the 15 in a spot where he can follow it. He pops it over Chronic, and then he double taps it in the empty net. This is mechanical possession at its best. Can we do M80 at this one? We might be able to do that M80 later this week. I know a team that people really wanted me to look at later this week is Moist. But yeah, we can look at M80. We can look at M80 sometime this week. I would say I would do it after the stream, but after the stream I got stuff to do. I kind of got my day split up into like different blocks, so I got as long as I can for the G2 stuff today, and then I might stream later tonight, but it wouldn't be an analysis. But here we go, Beast Mode. He's trying, and the one thing about like G2, they're trying to put the ball to open space. Here, this technically is a giveaway of possession. And here we can see Daniel rushing out as third man again, which is another issue that we're noticing from Daniel as well, where his teammates are both behind the ball, yet he's cutting. Well, let me see. Why does he do this? Actually, Beast Mode's up the wall. Never mind. I'm going to say this is a strength for Daniel. I wasn't paying close enough attention. If we look, Daniel initially was going to play off-ball pressure, but he sees Beast Mode's now launched himself out of the play. So Daniel understands the priority of second man over off-ball pressure here. So that is also really good for Daniel. He follows up and does really, really well. So here, when Daniel does have a read on the play, he's great. When he knows what's happening, he goes at it with full confidence. So this is actually a strength for Daniel. Because look at what Daniel does here. So right here, of course, when we're looking at Rocket League, we want someone applying off-ball pressure, someone on the ball, and someone supporting. But here, since Beast Mode ends up giving away possession, and Beast Mode's kind of thrown himself out of the play, now Atomic's going to fill in that first man. And Daniel, since he sees that Beast Mode's let himself out of the play, in his mind, support is more important than off-ball pressure. And it is true. Like, even though there are 3 necessary areas of the field of on-the-ball, support, and off-ball pressure, even though they're all necessary jobs in the field, there's still a priority to them. Ball guy's most important, then off-ball pressure. I'm sorry, then support, and then off-ball pressure. So right here in this instance, we see that Daniel, he was applying off-ball pressure, but when he sees that Beast Mode's not able to fill in support for Atomic, he says, you know what? Support is higher priority than off-ball pressure, so I'm going to cut to fill it in. And you know what? It's not the end of the world. Atomic, once he challenges and loses the 50, passes to Daniel, then he's going to look for off-ball pressure. Daniel will be ball guy, and hopefully Beast Mode settled himself down and filled in second at that point. So this is, I think we really have to emphasize this with Daniel's strengths. He is great. He will cut for he's cuts not only for speed, but he has a Daniel has a great understanding of where his teammates are and what job to fill in. So that's something we do got to put as a strength for Daniel. Did you say it was Applejack and Chronic versus Beast Mode and Daniel? What would be the best play in this situation? I don't know what you would mean by that. So if you can explain it further, I might be able to explain it verbally, but we do got to move on. Because if you're on mobile, I don't know if you're on mobile, you got the delay too. So you got to be aware of that. But all right. So far, G2 looking very, very strong. Like in a 2s game, what would be the best play? I mean, it's situational. Like, in order to determine who would win, you would have to ask who is the best at possession, who's the best at supporting, and who are the better individual players. That's what you would look at for 2s. So, Beast Mode and Daniel have already shown that no one can beat them when it comes to 2s. Even Rawas and Clears were not able to beat them in 2s, if I remember correctly. So here, Atomic. Great at reading the play, great at supporting. Looked like it was a one-time issue for Atomic when we saw that in game 1. Here we can see off-ball pressure, and then he rotates out. So it looks like Atomic does at least understand somewhat the, like, Atomic is really good at grabbing pads. That's something that we do have to note for Atomic. Atomic does sometimes, we do sometimes catch Atomic going for a big boost or going out of the play. But even if he goes out of the play, he's still great at grabbing pads and conserving momentum. That's something we can put down for Atomic. Great at grabbing pads and conserving individual momentum. So even though G2 as a whole have an issue with going for big boosts instead of going into position or rotating too far out of the play, that's something I think we can clarify for G2 team weaknesses. Sometimes, even with boost, players rotate too far out of the play and end up not filling in a role as quickly as possible. This gives the other team opportunities to break pressure, keep pressure, and gain possession. Right here, we can see Atomic is going to force. Then he leaves. Then he fills in second. Well, I wonder why he fills in second here. Let's look at the opponents. So here, Daniel's actually really far away from the play. So Atomic cuts and fills in first. So this is another situation where here he cuts and fills in first. It actually works out. But look, like even right here in the situation for Atomic, he ends up rotating really far away from the play. He wasn't able to support Daniel here very quickly. If Atomic had a better understanding of that Daniel was going to get possession, what I'd love to see from Atomic here is position himself in a way that he's able to face the play. So that is an issue we can see with Atomic here, but it's an issue we're seeing it with G2 as a whole. They're like gods at twos, yeah. G2, Beast Mode, I mean, even Atomic. I mean, all three of G2's players are really good at twos. And what really makes G2 good, especially what makes Beast Mode good, is his ability to read the play. Look at Beast Mode here for a little bit. We can look right here, right off the bat. We can see he's going to try and fill in second, and then he fills in first. This is a really good read from Beast Mode. Sure, he wasn't able to get a perfect read, but you're playing against three of the best individual players here in North America. Beast Mode, at a bare minimum, realizes he's first man, and he goes to force high. Even if he's, like, and look at, like, he didn't get a touch on that ball, but he got about as close as you could get. He's really good at reading the play in that situation. He forces high at a bare minimum. That part's a strong point. He cuts here to fill in first again. But one thing I will say, G2 doesn't understand the importance of a flow as much. So let's talk about that. So I will put that as a weakness. G2 Esports tends to have issues with ensuring there is a flow to the rotation. The lack of flow can mean the players get in each other's way or are facing their own net. This leads to lower momentum in some situations and less time facing the play, which invites the other team to keep applying pressure. But as we can see, this is really weird for me. Like, if we looked at G2 last season, we would see just the strengths and no weaknesses pretty much. So we can see G2 does have a lot of team weaknesses so far this season. That means that G2 individually could have messed up with this. Daniel and Beast Mode are different players, of course, than JNAPS in Chicago. But hopefully with Sathu as their coach, they can get things cleaned up, get a better understanding of the structure, the flow, and how to fill in. Would you say the capability to read the play is absolute must, or is it something that isn't needed as much as other game sensor mechanic? Well, you have to think about it like this. Imagine you're playing a game like Valorant or CSGO. In order for you and your team to make the best decisions possible, what do you need as much of as possible? You need information, right? You need as much information as possible. So in Valorant or CSGO, for example, a lot of the round is spent trying to gather information or to goad teams into believing something or not. It's more so a play with that information. But in Rocket League, all information on the field is available to you at all times. So what's the skill that allows us to gather information, as much information as possible to make the best decisions as possible? That's what reading the play is. Reading the play is our ability to gather information, and the better we are at gathering information faster than our opponents, aka our ability to read the play, that's what determines our individual skill difference when it comes down to smarts. Game sense is a little too generic a lot of the time, but you can think of it as reading the play is how we gather information to make the best smart individual decisions. That's probably the better way to look at it. But on the topic of flow, let's go back to this board right here. Why do we want to flow? Well, the reason we want to flow is to maximize individual momentum. But then you're probably going to ask, why do we want to maximize individual momentum? Well, let's draw it like this. Let's say we have a soccer player. Let's say we have a hockey player. Let's say we got a Rocket League player, for example. All right. Let's say they're all facing this direction. Let's say they all have momentum in this direction. A soccer player's sphere of influence isn't going to be that much bigger in front of him. No matter how fast a soccer player is going, he's not going to be able to cover that much in front of where he himself currently is. Whereas a hockey player has a lot of momentum. They can build up a lot more speed. So when we look at a hockey player's sphere of influence in the direction of momentum, it's a lot bigger. And it's the same thing with a Rocket League player without boost. But of course, if we have momentum in the forward direction in Rocket League, what do we have access to? We have boost. So if we have maximized momentum in the forward direction, we also have access to boost, which further increases our individual spheres of influence. So that's why an important team concept when it comes to high level Rocket League is ensuring there's a flow to the rotation so that we can maximize momentum and therefore maximize our individual spheres of influence when it comes down to high level Rocket League. In G2, we are seeing some instances where players are rotating down the front post, or where players are rotating and facing backwards even when their teammate is forcing. So by the time that ball gets hit, essentially they're guiding the ball towards their own net. Of course, they're not going to intentionally own goal, but essentially they're inviting the opponents to come to their side of the field. And this is actually an issue with a couple North American teams. FaZe had this issue last season. NRG are known for this. If you watch NRG went against BDS at the Fall Major a couple of seasons ago, sometimes NRG would always rotate along the outsides towards their net. NRG at most of the time in the game would have 6 players all facing their net. And just think about that from a logical perspective. If everybody has momentum towards the NRG net, where's that ball going to funnel? It's going to funnel towards their net. It's going to make it way harder for NRG to be able to not get scored on. So now you're probably going to ask, well, why were NRG so good for so long? NRG had 3 of the best individual players in the world on the same team. But their rotations were so bad that even though I would say NRG were individually far better than BDS, their rotations were so bad, and BDS were individually just good enough. And BDS rotations were so good that even though NRG had the 3 best individual players in the world at the time, they still lost to a team like BDS. Because BDS were just individually good enough, and they knew how to somewhat rotate. Look at Queso versus NRG at the Winter Major next season. Moist, they weren't as good at BDS, or Queso wasn't as good at BDS at rotating, but they were good enough, and mechanically, they were actually able to match up with NRG, and they end up beating NRG. NRG's rotations and team momentum and playstyle were so bad that you're funneling the ball towards your own net. Now, G2 aren't as bad as that. We always see somebody behind the ball and someone supporting, but their support players sometimes rotate down the front post. Their third man sometimes do that as well. Their second man sometimes is facing their own net even when their teammate's challenging. So this issue with flow is going to end up hurting G2 sometimes. So we do have to put down the lack of flow. So we already did put it down. That's something that we do have to keep in mind for G2 as we continue. Would you say learning the capability? Oh, I already answered that question. All right. Yeah, we can see right here, beast mode's a rotating map, but look, rotating down the front post. And now we can see we're funneling the ball towards our own end. And this is something that is not good. Like when we look at when we look at North American teams versus EU teams, the North American teams that normally have the best chance against EU teams are the ones that do have at least a good flow. Even if they do have the mental issues, they still at minimum have a good flow. That's why G2, individually, they maybe weren't able to match up confidence wise or mechanically with a lot of EU teams, but they were, since they had such a good rotational system, that G2 are almost always a threat no matter who they were playing against internationally. But now, since we have this flow and issue, like this flow issue will hurt when it comes down to international play. But we can see in this issue, in this instance again, where instead of support, we see an issue where no one's supporting Atomic, and we're actually going back for Big Boost again. So the issue here is playing boost over positioning again. Like, G2 are willing to accept a giveaway of pressure to grab a big boost, but as we can see, a lot of issues that come with that. But thank you so much to everybody who's shown up for the stream, and thank you to everybody who maybe has made it this far in the YouTube video as well. Much appreciated. But right now, G2. So now let's talk about G2. Of course, we're being very pessimistic. We're in replay review. But the big thing that we have to take away from G2, they always have someone on the ball and someone supporting. They try to have off-ball pressure when they can remember to. So they do understand, at least somewhat, the 3 necessary areas of the pitch. And individually, they're some of the fastest and most mechanical players in the world. If this team can be confident on LAN, if G2 can go into their first LAN, win their first series against a decent team, and if G2 can get through Swiss 3-0, I genuinely think that G2 will at minimum make the grand final. So that's my call. So if Beast Mode at this first if G2 at this first major can go 3-0 in Swiss, minimum they're making grand final. That's how individually good this G2 squad is when they're playing with confidence. But if G2 don't have that confidence, we do see a lot of their issues might not help them if they're not playing with confidence. A lot of North American players have that mentality issue, but as you can see, G2 again hurting their own issues. Thank you, Hashi, for subbing with the Prime. Welcome to the stream, Hashi. Thank you so much for the Prime. So we got 2 Prime subs today. Thank you so much for Hashi and NJC. Much appreciated. You guys are the GOATs. But I think we do have a more... I think we do got a better picture of what's going well and what's not going well for G2. Obviously, G2, I mean, this looks like a lot of weaknesses and a lot of strengths. As we can see, we do got a lot of notes for all these players. Got a sub to my GOAT. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But as we can see, a lot of strengths for G2 team-wise and a lot of weaknesses. So as we can see, G2's strengths and weaknesses kind of balance out from a team perspective. So then we look at the individual side, and here is where we see G2. Beast Mode, a lot of strengths. So Beast Mode's strengths and weaknesses kind of match up. Daniel's strengths and weaknesses kind of match up, and Atomic individually has more strengths and weaknesses. So what can we interpret looking at this, looking at their notes? Well, since they have a ton of strengths and a ton of weaknesses, that means G2, against teams that are going to match them. So for G2, from an individual perspective, there's only a couple of teams that can somewhat match them. I think G2 are by far the most mechanical team in the world right now. But the next most mechanical team, Carmine Core, then Vitality, and then I would say mechanically Gen G, and then I'd say BDS. So this would be in terms of individual mechanics. Individual skill-wise, G2 strength-wise are this good. But when you look at it from a team perspective, G2, honestly, G2 still looks pretty good, but it's going to be a toss-up. Like, G2 and Carmine Core are honestly very similar team-wise right now when it comes down to the notes that we looked at. And then it would be Vitality from a team. Actually, from a team perspective, it would actually be BDS. Oh, excuse me, not BDS. Gentlemates. I forget their acronym. GM8, I think, is their acronym. Gentlemates Alpine. So it goes G2 and then KC from a team perspective. And then we see Gentlemates. And then, honestly, then we probably see BDS. And then we see vitality from a team perspective. And then probably, and then honestly, it's probably Gen G or a Furia down here if I were to make a guess without analyzing these teams. I do watch their gameplay, but I haven't fully analyzed them just yet. All right, I'm gonna go play. I'll watch. Thank you so much, Ashy. Enjoy your games. But if I'm gonna analyze the notes, if G2 are able to play with confidence, they should beat any team they play. But if G2 are not playing with confidence, their weaknesses kind of match their strengths, right? So if G2 are playing with confidence, their strengths make them the best team in the world. But if G2 are not able to hold their nerve, if they're not able to play with confidence, then we could see G2 losing to a lot of EU teams who are kind of close to them in individual skill and team skill. In which case, this has happened before when it comes down to looking at high level Rocket League. When a team is strong, when their team is confident, their weaknesses get minimized and their strengths get stronger. But when a team is playing unconfident, that's when we see their strengths kind of get diminished and their weaknesses show up more in those replays. So, what's my prediction for G2 for the major? If G2 could show up with confidence, minimum grand final. If they can show up with confidence in every single match, if they can go 3-0 in Swiss, minimum grand final. If G2 go round 4, I think they can make I think they make semifinals. I think G2 have the potential to win the whole thing no matter what. But I'm talking about in terms of a minimum. If G2 go 3-1, maybe not looking as confident, then honestly, maybe they're getting knocked out top 8, top 4. So what are we as G2 fans hoping for G2? We hope that they can play to do their game plan no matter what. Don't care about execution. Kind of that EU mentality of, hey, play for my team, do what I can to help out my team, go even if I'm not 100% sure, so I can at least consistently apply pressure. If G2 can do that, they'll be a great team. But if Daniel has issues where he worries about execution instead of doing his job and starts hesitating and G2 starts slowing down because of it, or all three players worry about their execution, then we're going to see a lot more of their weaknesses. Because as we've seen in these deep dive analysis last season and this season, the same strengths and weaknesses show up no matter what. What matters is the amount of those strengths and weaknesses show up, which is determined by how confident they are. But all right, thank you so much for everybody who's shown up to the video. Much appreciated. Thank you so much to everybody showing up to the stream. The notes will be on the spreadsheet later will be on the spreadsheet probably right after this. So make sure to check Twitter or YouTube. In the YouTube link there at the end of the description, there is a link to the overall spreadsheet. So if you're watching the stream, go to the Carmine Core video, link to the spreadsheets there, and we'll be posting the updated and finished notes for G2. But overall, great stuff from G2. They're a very solid team when it comes down to their individual skill. When it comes down to their team side, the team side's still good, but there's also a lot of weaknesses that teams can indeed exploit. So hopefully G2 go into this major with confidence and the next regional with confidence, because otherwise some of these teams might be able to catch them off guard. But without further ado, hope you guys have a good rest of your day, rest of your night, and I'll see you guys in the next stream or video. Peace.